In 2018, the World Economic Forum discussed the possibilities of mind control using sound waves. This is something that several people have claimed to be a target of. They have become known as targeted individuals. A subcommittee for Homeland Security was recently held to discuss this technology and the targeting of U.S. government employees and their families. This is commonly known as the Havana syndrome and dates back to 2016 when U.S. diplomatic personnel in Cuba experienced unexplained health problems.
Guys, if your assessments here are correct, these are very covert, aren't they? They don't leave behind fragments, etc. They could absolutely be used by our adversaries and have very low levels of, very easy to deny that they were even there, that they were used. Is that correct?
That's correct. There's no entry or exit. How they're designed is to make the target feel like they're crazy, like they're imagining things, especially on the low duration, the low intensity, long duration hits.
Have any of you three panelists ever seen one of these?
I have seen a 1991 version of and it looks like a satellite dish with a unit this size attached to it. And of course, over the years, miniaturization has been possible. Obviously, there's a limitation to how miniaturized it can be because of the antenna size, which is always related to the wave. But still, it is something that can be well contained in the trunk of a car or even a large backpack. My experience shows that it can be cobbled together. It's something that can, a rough, crude version of this that would probably require longer exposure than the more advanced version that has been tested, as we see from this document, can be put together inexpensively. But again, I would abstain from commenting further, lest I encourage people to try it at home.
What you all are saying is there's a government cover-up of the fact that something is out there afflicting, targeting us.
The government in the IC assessment is wrong. It's dead wrong. I can't tell you if it's a cover-up, why they're doing this, malfeasance. I won't go there.
So cover-up would depend on intent. There could be good reasons to withhold information. I will say that the public statements that the executive branch is making is inconsistent with the classified record. And then it would be Congress's job as an oversight authority to determine why that is, whether it was a legitimate reason to mislead the public or because of some nefarious reason, or all the above.
Mr. Grozev said you spoke to a Russian agent who said that they believe that Americans are using these same on them. Is that correct?
That is correct, back in the 80s.
Might that have something to do with part of the CIA's motive to cover up the existence of this tech and these?
That is a very logical possibility.
While it was admitted that this technology is being used, the discussion was focused primarily on Russia, as if to create more incentive to escalate with the Russian Federation. When the question of whether it has been used on the American population was raised, it was dismissed with a smile.
Are any of you aware of any reported incidents from individuals who are not members of the United States government? Domestically, I should say?
There are many people who believe they are victims of AHIs. All you have to do is look at my Twitter feed whenever I post on the topic. I only represent federal government employees and their families, so I don't focus on the accuracy of those particular claims.
There is plenty of evidence showing that the targeted individuals who claim to be victims of this were the guinea pigs in today's all-out on the American people. And our government is far more concerned with starting another. Former high-ranking FBI agent Ted Gunderson reported in 2011 that himself and thousands of others were being targeted. FBI agent Mike German confirmed this as well. Several federal agents have reported that they were targeting individual Americans, including people who were simply pro-life, and that they were pressured to put more people on their targeting lists to legitimize more federal funding. These Homeland Security fusion centers are able to put any American citizen on the watch list without any reason or due process. In 2012, NSA whistleblower William Binney reported that the feds are conducting comprehensive surveillance on nearly every U.S. citizen and targeting whomever they please. In 2014, Glenn Greenwald exposed the methods used to target individuals, such as hacking into people's social media accounts, posing as that person, and contacting their friends and coworkers. TargetedJustice.com is currently working on suing the federal government for targeting individual U.S. citizens with different high-tech, including directed energy weapons. The Havana syndrome, when diplomats in Cuba were attacked with directed energy weapons, was not an isolated event. There are thousands of individuals who claim to be under this same sort of attack, and they have the scars to prove it. As far back as 1976, the technology to remotely alter brainwaves has existed, including voice-to-skull technology that allows the government to directly transmit voices into people's brains. As bad as all this is, it is likely to get much worse. In 2017, Dr. James Giordano gave a lecture on the latest government technologies to target individuals, such as neuro-weapons to control brain function and modify memories.
I'm looking to target key individuals who may then be influential to relative aspects of their representative groups. I can affect individuals' brain functions in a variety of different ways, both positively and negatively, by engaging or disengaging nodes and networks of the brain that therefore affect their cognitions, emotions, and ultimately their behaviors. Something my colleague Jamie Canton likes to play with an awful lot is the idea of specialized neural operations. And here, once again, we're talking about the use of either and/or devices to modify the integrity of brain function that we realize can also modify individuals' perception of time and space. We talked earlier about how these may be used in interrogation scenarios, and this too may be used against key individuals to be able to modify their perception of time, their perception of what occurred and what did not, memory modification, etc.
Nanoparticulates that can give an individual a stroke.
So what we're able to do here is infiltrate the brain space with nanoparticulate matter that aggregates in situ, on site in the brain, and does one of two things: either penetrates from the vascular space, gets in through the bloodstream, gets in through the nose, through the mucosa, or infiltrates the vascular space and clogs it. What is the result? What's called a nanoparticulate stroke, or a hemorrhagic diathesis, fancy word, for it's a predisposition to individuals having brain bleeds.
He explains how they can make people sick with an undetectable illness to make them go crazy.
What I'm doing is I'm using a dispersion methodology to be able to infect sentinel cases with a highly morbid condition. These individuals complain. Again, this is a central nervous system condition. So they're complaining of whatever the bug may do. It'll produce some cascade of neurological and neuropsychiatric signs and symptoms. What I've now done is I've got every individual who is diagnostically hypochondriacal, and I've got every individual who's the worried well flooding the public health system, banging on the door. The CDC comes back and says, nonsense, that's not real. I come back and say, that's fake news.
He says they can already control insects and use them to deliver
I infiltrate that bug's nervous system and I control the way it moves. By controlling the way it moves, I control the way it goes. I control its wings pattern. I control where it hovers, where it flies, where it articulates. And what I can also do is I can then couple this to a very, very small scale set of either biosensors or cameras. And what I basically have here is a biodrone. I can go one step further and I can also impregnate that individual organism, with a very small scale weaponizable delivery mode. In other words, if I'm using a very, very small scale bio, such as a very potent organotoxin, or the delivery of a very small level of microbes that we know can either replicate and infect, or is genetically modified to have a very, very high morbidity effect, I can then utilize this not only as a reconnaissance drone, but also as an infiltrative weaponizable drone that can then deliver some payload. If we talk about what brain science is, let me just give you a little bit of brief background on this field. It is now called neuroscience. As a titular field, as a named field, neuroscience has only been in existence for 40 years. I know that because I've been a neuroscientist for about 38 of those 40 years. When I first applied to get into a program in neuroscience, there were only 4 neuroscience programs in the continental United States, 4. Right now, at this particular point, there are well over 200 dedicated university and collegiate programs. Several programs at the junior college level, several programs at the high school level, and many, many dozens of independent think tanks and philanthropic organizations solely devoted to brain sciences. That's just here in the United States. Furthermore, what becomes critically important for you to understand is that brain science is not just a United States enterprise or effort, nor is it singularly an effort of the United States allies worldwide. Increasingly, it is becoming an international, multinational, global, and independently exercised event and endeavor, which increases the capability of the brain sciences to develop not only new theories, but ever more sophisticated tools. I like this slide a lot because what it presents for you, ladies and gentlemen, is a century-long history of brain science, even before it was called neuroscience. Look, let's face it, for as long as human beings were looking in some reflective pool and recognized that the thing looking back at them was themselves, there was some interest in what makes me, what makes me think, what makes me feel, what makes me behave the way I do and you behave and think the way you do. What is my sense of self? Do I have free will, and what is the nature of that, and how can we affect that in a variety of ways that go from the non-kinetic all the way to the kinetic? If we take centenary jumps into the era of the Enlightenment, we can see the great thinkers that came before and during the Enlightenment, inclusive but not limited to people like René Descartes, pondered the idea of what that means. Cogito, ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. The inverse of the statement that in many cases was implicit but now becomes ever more explicit is what makes me think. And if I can understand what makes me think and makes you feel, then that understanding may in fact flavor, if not directly influence, the way you and I interact. But more than that, if in fact I understand how it is that your brain does what your brain does, I may be able to access your brain and affect your brain, indirectly and directly. And what this allows us to do is to create tremendous potential and possibility and probability, potential, possibility, and probability of what the brain sciences can do and will do. Remember these three letters, A, and A. Keep them as your viable mantra for the duration of this course, today, and throughout your professional careers and each and all of the opportunities that you have to interface and try to understand the power that the brain and cognitive sciences can yield. A, the ability to assess the brain and its functions. A, the ability to access the brain on a variety of levels, from the subcellular all the way to the social. And A, the ability to affect the brains and the individuals in which those brains are embodied and the ecologies in which those individuals enact, engage, encounter, from the level of the individual to the group, to the community, to the populational. Look at the power that understanding tools and techniques of the brain sciences afford. It's there before you on the screen. Obviously, if in fact this gives me some insight to the way people interact, inclusive of the way they may interact in bellicose, aggressive, violent, and volatile ways, and it also confers upon me certain powers to be able to influence that, alter that, change that, mitigate that, then clearly I'm able to use the brain sciences, as we have tried repeatedly in the past, to influence the postures and capabilities not only of our own individuals who are engaged in intelligence and national security operations, but those who seek to. In other words, we can utilize these things in national security, intelligence, and defense. Please look at the timeline. A mere 10 years ago, 2008, the National Academy of Sciences National Research Council convened a group to create a report dedicated to if and why and how brain sciences might be viable, valid, and of value in national security, intelligence, and defense operations. And in 2008, they did a 5-year retrospective and came to the conclusion that although these things may be valid, their relative viability and value at that particular time rendered them not ready for prime time play. Our group, working with others internationally, inclusive of the Nuffield Council in the UK, proceeded forward from 2008 and did a slightly deeper dive, looking at international capabilities, limitations, and delimitations in the brain sciences, and came to a very, very different set of conclusions. Not only were the brain sciences increasingly being considered, interested, and used for possibilities of national security, intelligence, and defense, but they would continue to be so as more and more countries internationally develop the capabilities and the specialized agendas to be able to look into the brain and affect the brain. So much so that by 2014, the exact same committee reconvened and recognized at that time that the brain sciences indeed were ready and in operational prime time for intelligence and national security agenda. In other words, it is valid, valuable, and already in operational play. The brain is the current and future battle space.